Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon at Savageries, and today I thought, as it is one of my big book weekenders, I would do a video all about some of my very favourite big books. Some of the big books that I love hugely, as it were. Apologies, sorry. There's so many puns that you can do when you're talking about big books, like You Cannot Lie, etc. It's too easy and too tempting, frankly. Anyway, let's all move swiftly on. If you're wondering, what on earth is a big book weekender? Well, I shall link a video down below that talks about it, but basically it is where over the bank holiday weekends this year I decided I would try and get through some more big books, and if you guys wanted to join in with whatever books you wanted to read, that was ace and lovely, and lots of you have, and it's been really ace. But some of you also wanted to join in with what I am reading, and if you're wanting to join in late in the game, it's not too late, it's only Saturday as this goes live, then the book that I'm reading this weekend is The Parentations by Kate Mayfield, which I've discussed a few times on this channel, I think, and it is quite different. It's quite a quirky historical novel. That's all I'm going to say for now. So let's go on to 10 big books that you might want to head to this weekend too, or you might just want to head to over the next few weeks and months, or you might want to take a few or get a few and from your library or from a bookshop or whatever. Preferably don't steal them from someone's house, but wherever you want to get them from, and read them on the next big book weekender, which will be the last weekend in August. There we go. Admin all done. Let's get on with some of my favourite books. And I thought some of my favourite big books, I should say. And I thought I would start off with some lesser known books, and one of the lesser known contemporary books that is some lesser known big books, and one contemporary lesser known big book that I think should be better known is Pilcrow by Adam Mars Jones. Now, I do apologise about the lighting. I've chosen to film at a really silly time of day, but if I don't do it now, I won't do it, so I'm getting on with it. This is all about a young man called John Cromer who grows up in the 1950s. He's growing up both gay and also with a disability in a time when neither of those things are either dealt with particularly well or, well, yeah, they're not dealt with particularly well. It's a story about how he seems a really unlikely hero, and yet how he becomes one just because of how he defies the expectations that are laid out of him. It's also part of what was meant to be a trilogy. The second one, Sedilla, came out, but I haven't heard anything about a third one, which makes me sad. But I would highly recommend this book. I need to read much more Adam Mars Jones. He's written some other books that I've meant to read. So yeah, really recommend that. It's the case of a narrator or a hero of the piece that you won't forget, which I really loved. I thought I'd also go with a really kind of sort of under the radar classic. It is a cult classic, and it is, oh, and you can't really see that very well, sorry, Eastland by Ellen Wood. Now, when I used to be a tour guide at Highgate Cemetery, I would always point out Ellen Wood, or sometimes she's known Mrs. Henry Wood, but Ellen Wood to me because, you know, forward thinking. And yeah, she was a kind of grave that I always pointed out because I always felt like she was a little bit forgotten in the Victorian era, and this book caused such a sensation. There was a huge period of sensation novels, and if you want to me to talk about sensation novels later in the year, because autumn is the best time to read a sensation novel, to be fair, then I will do. But basically they're all about the things that were sensational at the time. So you get murder quite often, you get bigamy, you get all these kinds of things, and in this case it's about a woman called Lady Isabel who leaves her family behind for her very wicked seducer. But it's also what goes on in the whole of the village of East Lynne at the same time, and there's also an incident with a governess as well, and I won't say more than that because the twists and the turns and the kind of shocks are what are wonderful. But I love sensational fiction. I absolutely love it. It's some of my favourites, and it generally happens around the 1860s onwards, where these books just kind of were set out to shock people, and one more is coming up actually. Not next. Next up is a book by an author who I'm sure you've all heard much about, but I don't think I've mentioned him that much on this channel, and I used to really love him. Not that I don't love him now, I just haven't read him for quite a long time, and that is Haruki Murakami. Again, sorry about the glare on that book. And this is Kafka on the Shore, which was my first Murakami that I read, and I instantly completely fell in love with it. I don't think I knew what I was expecting. It's really bonkers, really weird. It kind of follows two main characters, and you've got, and I want to get this right, Tamura, who runs away from home at 15, and who I seem to remember has really weird dreams about sleeping with his dead mother's ghost. That's that kind of book it is. And then you also have Nakata, who is an ageing, I think he goes out, from what I remember, because there's a really bad character who goes around killing cats, but Nakata goes around trying to rescue lost cats, or trying to track them anyway, whilst also there's this really evil, dark demon figure who is going around killing cats. So if you love cats, possibly not one for you, but very quirky, very bonkers, very weird. A book that has been mentioned on Jen Campbell's channel a lot, and I agree is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book, is The Crimson Petal and the White by Michelle Faber. And this is all about a prostitute called Sugar in the 1870s, I think. Yes, 1870s London. And it's just, how can I describe this other than just one of the best romps you're ever going to go on. It just takes you into the world, particularly Mrs. Castaway's brothel is just a wonderful kind of, all the scenes in there were wonders. But yeah, I love this book very, very much indeed. It's been well read, as you can see. It probably used to crack the spines and all sorts. Wouldn't happen now. But yeah, I don't know what more to say about this because most of you will have heard about it anyway, but I think this is an absolutely stonking massive book. It's a stonking big book, and I cannot lie. I'm sorry, I've done it again. That's worrying me in the corner just there. That was bothering me. Then we have a kind of, it hasn't become a modern classic yet. I don't think it can be a modern classic yet. But what is it, Simon? I'll tell you. It's Andrea Levy's Small Island, and this, I got a bit bored of World War books because I was brought up in a time where, for some reason, I think our year just constantly throughout all of our history years at school always learnt about World War I or World War II, and that was kind of it. Where were the Tudors? Where were the Victorians? My two real favourite periods in history, but actually maybe they wouldn't be my favourites if I'd studied them as much as I did World War I and II. Anyway, this is set after, it's the beginning, no it's not, it's set just after, come on Simon, it's set just after, I get my years wrong, I always get my 20s and my 40s mixed up. Anyway, it's set after World War II. It is when Gilbert brings his wife over from Jamaica, and what happens is they end up having to, well, they have nowhere to live, so they end up living in the house of Queenie Blythe, who has rented out her rooms while her husband has been at war. But that's not the only thing that she's been doing while her husband has been at war. What else has she been doing? That's the secret that I can't tell you. What I can tell you is neither Hortense's narrative nor Queenie's narrative will be narratives that you will ever forget. These are some of the most vivid female characters I have ever read, and I loved them for it, and I loved that book for it. Speaking of vivid female characters, would you like to know about a character that was so vivid and so wicked and so vividly wicked that she was almost, well, I think the book was banned briefly because people could not believe a woman could be so evil. And that's possibly why I love this book, because you know from the off you're dealing with a villainess, and sometimes it's wonderful to kind of follow the anti-hero or the wicked villainess, I suppose. And what's the book, Simon? Go on, tell us. It's Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Now, Wilkie Collins is one of my favourite Victorian authors, and you'd be expecting possibly a Charles Dickens big stonker to be in my top big books of all time. However, I don't really like Charles Dickens. I think Wilkie Collins wipes the floor with him. Shock horror. Sorry, I think it. And that's because I think his stories have more pace. They deal with all the cultural stuff and all of the societal stuff of the time that Dickens does, but I think they do it in a much more punchy, vivid, often I actually think more realistic, despite how bizarre, and again, this is a sensation novel. There's a lot of murder in here. In fact, Lydia Gwilt, why is she so evil, Simon? Tell us. Well, you know from the off that she's a temptress, she's a bigamist, she's a laudanum addict, and she kills her husband. She's a husband poisoner. But that kind of you know from the off. And I think this book, although I have no proof of this, may or may not have been an inspiration for Daphne du Maurier's My Cousin Rachel. It's just a feeling I have, I don't know why. But yeah, it's just a fascinating, gripping, twisty, murderous, villainous, fantastic big book. And they're my sorts of favourites. And actually, a book that goes nicely in that sort of theme is a book that also looks at the 1800s but is written contemporarily, but actually is also set in the 1930s with the main character looking back on what happened with her in Gillespie and I by Jane Harris, which has another one of my favourite ever female narrators, and that is Harriet Baxter, who, if you like an unreliable narrator, you are going to have an absolute field day with this book. You're going to love it. You're just not going to be able to get enough of it. It follows how she met Ned Gillespie and then his family, and how she sort of, well, how she twists her way into their lives and makes herself a big part of their lives when really they don't know her at all initially. And there's a little bit of fatal attraction about it yet in this sort of late Victorian era. I think it is sensational, wonderful, sensational, sorry, but I think this is just such a wonderful book. And you know when sometimes you read a book and you think, that book just chimes with me so much, it surely must have been written for me. Well, it wasn't, but in my head it was. I love Jane Harris's other books. I love Sugar Money, that was one of my favourite books of last year, and actually I could have chosen The Observations, which was her debut novel, which is another big historical rompy fabulous narrator in the form of Bessie Buckley, who is just this sort of foul-mouthed wench, I suppose is how I would describe her, but you love her so much, and she's, oh, you just root for her, and all the secrets that she finds out, and all the sort of, well, ways that she gets herself into trouble. Anyway, sorry, I've started talking about both of Jane's books. Maybe I should do a video on Jane's books, full stop. Would you like an author spotlight video on Jane Harris? I may well do it. Yeah, so I would highly, highly, highly recommend Gillespie Night. It felt like it had been written for me, and that's amazing when that happens. Then, going all along with sensational, it seems to me that I like a bit of a sensation novel with, you know, murder and all those kind of things going on. We have Peyton Place by Grace Metallus. Now this, I think, is a great, well, I think it's one of the real American greats. And again, there might be people who are watching this said you've just binned off Dickens and now you'd binning off Steinbeck instead of, and switching him, sorry, savouring him. I don't think I'd ever want to savour Steinbeck. But I have read Steinbeck, actually, The Grapes of Wrath. That's a very big book. Didn't really like it. Ironically very depressing, considering it's about the Depression, or maybe not ironically. Which do I mean? Back to this. Peyton Place is set in the, I think it's 1960s or 1950s. It was written in 1956, and I think it might have actually got banned. It might be a banned book. And isn't there a banned book week coming up in September maybe? So this could be a good book to head for that. Anyway, it's about Peyton Place, which is a, well, town in America. And what I love about this book is that it's not really about one character, although it kind of is, but not really. It's about all the twitching curtains of that village and all the things they think are going on, but you get to go behind those curtains and see the secrets of the curtain twitchers who are watching over the people who also have amazing secrets. It's all about secrets, it's all about desire, murder. I mean, there are some really dark themes in this book, actually, just to give a slight trigger warning. There is some very dark stuff going on here too, but I just think it's amazingly written. And what makes me sad about this book is Valley of the Dolls seems to become this cult classic, and I think this deserves that sort of status. It is just a phenomenal book, and yet I think gets treated as a bit of a throwaway one every so often, and that to me is wrong. Then we have a Man Booker winner. I don't think any of the books have won the Man Booker, but we do have a Wambunner. No, not a Wambunner winner, a Man Booker winner, and that is The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan. Again, sorry about this, because I've chosen some very, very, very white books. This novel absolutely blew my mind. I was not sure how I was going to feel about it. Again, it's based around World War II, it's based around a prison camp and the Burma Death Railway, and it follows Dorigo Evans, who is a doctor but then ends up a prisoner of war and ends up being part of this Burma Death Railway. And it's one of the most moving, touching, heartbreaking, wonderful books that I've ever... I don't know if you can describe a book as being wonderful if it is so utterly, utterly heartbreaking, but if you have not read this book, please, please, please go and get it, because I cannot urge you enough to read it. I don't think I know anybody who's read it and hasn't completely and utterly fallen in love with Dorigo, but also a character called Mickey, who I will say nothing more about, but his storyline is just... oh, anyway, it's really weird, isn't it, how some books you start thinking back of them and you get very emotional. This is one of those books for me. I went through the whole gamut of emotions reading it, and I thought I was going to have to wait. It's one of those books that I actually almost couldn't review because it was so impactful on me. A bit like Tin Man by Sarah Winman, which I know is very small, but there are certain books you read sometimes that they have such an effect on you, you can't actually write how that is. You can't write those emotions down or type them up, whichever. But yeah, please, please, please. It's also an amazing love story as well. And I don't normally love love stories, so this one I did love. And yeah, I think that also, just for me personally, adds to it, because often I'm like, oh, love stories, but I don't like that. And then finally, I couldn't not mention this book. I know it's a contentious book. I know some people hate this book, but I think it is quite an astonishing piece of work. And that is, of course, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This follows Malcolm, JB, Willem, and Jude. And it looks at their friendship, and initially it's kind of... I remember starting this book thinking, where's this going to go? And then as it goes on, you sort of break away from the four as a group of friends and actually focus on Jude and his life and his background and what's happened to him, and found him in the position that he's in, where he's constantly living in pain, he is disabled, and you know something deeply, deeply traumatic has happened to him, and all of his friends know that this traumatic thing has happened. And what's incredible is you as the reader begin to learn what's happened to him way before his friends do, and I think that was dealt with incredibly. It looks at male friendship, which is something that I don't think is talked about that much. It looks at sexuality, it looks at disability, it looks at whether we should or should not want to survive, which I think is a really interesting conversation. And yeah, I just think this book is incredible. Really, really tough to read, really hard going, masses of trigger warnings around this book. But if you want to try a big book that's going to make you really go through an emotional, it just pulls you through all the emotions. And yeah, this book is such a book. I know lots of people hate it. I know, sorry, I just really banged that down. I know that Jen Campbell will probably be swearing at this screen along with many other people that I know and love. Just throwing that in there at the end. But that's what's amazing, isn't it? Is that sometimes you can read these books and have such total polar opposite ideas about them, but at the same time still love each other deeply. I'm just throwing that in as a little caveat. So yeah, those are 10 big books that I really, really love hugely. Did it again. And I would recommend to you. What are your favourite big books? Why? Let me know, because it might give me some inspiration for some books to read, either to pull off the shelves this weekend if I already have them, or to get my hands on for the August Big Book Weekender, which will be the last weekend in August. Anyway, I'm going to go now, and I will... Oh, and if you've noticed, I have got new glasses on. But I am really going to go now, and I will speak to you tomorrow. In fact, no, tomorrow is the first of the Queer Quarterly videos from me, and, well, it's one of our first book choices. It's not actually the first video. We did a video introducing it before. I'll link that down below too, just for fun. But yeah, I will speak to you all on Monday, or I spoke to you in the past with that one. I will speak to you again. Simon, just say goodbye. Bye.